The salt spray of the Atlantic lashed against the isolated cabin windows, a constant, abrasive reminder of our new life. My name is Clara, not Natalie, and this isn't a suburban cul-de-sac. It's Black Point, Maine, a place where the nearest neighbor is a half-hour drive and the only landmark is the towering, decommissioned lighthouse. I moved here with my 7-year-old daughter, Lila, 6 months ago. We needed a fresh start, far away from the stifling scrutiny of Boston and the ghost of my failed marriage to Arthur. Arthur wasn't like your Marcus. He wasn't a good man trying to protect us from a distance. He was a successful, volatile architect who simply walked out, leaving a crater in our financial stability and a silence in our home that I still struggle to fill. He sends money, of course, a sterile, automated transaction, but never calls. That part of my life, I told myself, was definitively closed off. Our routine here is quiet, almost monastic. I work remotely as a technical writer, the rhythmic clack of my old keyboard competing with the howl of the wind. Lila, a solitary child, spends her afternoons sketching the rugged coastline and the looming lighthouse. She's observant, preternaturally so, and it was her noticing something that started the unraveling. About 2 months after we settled in, I met Brendan. He wasn't introduced by a relative. He was the local handyman, hired to fix a persistent draft in the cabin's ancient chimney. Brendan was a former Coast Guard rescue diver, rugged and taciturn, with eyes the color of the gray ocean. He didn't chase conversation, but he was practical, reliable, and more importantly, he treated Lila with a quiet respect, never patronizing her sketches or her fascination with the sea. He'd often bring her polished stones and rare shells. Seeing the easy rapport between them, something Lila never truly had with her father, a warmth started to thaw the deep freeze around my heart. The thought of genuine connection, of maybe building a new, honest life began to form. Brendan was steady, grounding. Then came the peculiar incident. On Tuesday afternoon, Lila came running in from the beach, breathless and wide-eyed. "Mom, look!" She thrust a small dark object into my hand. It was a fragment of driftwood, smoothed by the sea, but what caught my attention was a neat, unnatural groove etched into it. It wasn't natural wear. It was a single, capital letter, J. I asked, "Where did you find this?" My voice sharper than intended. "Near the lighthouse rocks, tucked under the kelp," she whispered. It felt like a secret. I dismissed it as trash or perhaps an old marker buoy broken free and threw it into the wood stove kindling basket. But later that night, as the fire crackled, I saw the J again. It triggered a sudden, icy memory I hadn't revisited in years. A childhood friend, Jenna, who vanished without a trace from a nearby summer camp when I was 10. Jenna had a habit of carving her initial into everything. The next day, Lila brought me another one, a piece of faded, sun-bleached rope with a knot I recognized from my own brief sailing phase. Tied into the rope was a tiny, folded slip of paper. Unfurling it with trembling hands, I read a single typewritten line. "He sees you when he sleeps." This was no coincidence. The air in the cabin suddenly felt thick, electrified with a silent warning. I felt a surge of panic, remembering Ethan's feeling of unease in your story, but here, the threat felt less personal and more like a consequence of something buried. I immediately went to the local sheriff, a tired-looking man named Deputy Miles. He listened to the whole story, the isolation, the initials, the cryptic note, with a weary patience. "Clara, Black Point is quiet, too quiet. We haven't had a disappearance since the 90s. This looks like a prank, or maybe a fragment of a local legend." He gestured vaguely towards the lighthouse. "We'll increase patrols, but unless someone trespasses, my hands are tied." His response was nearly identical to the officer in your tale, and the helplessness I felt was crushing. That same evening I called Brendan. He came over quickly. When I showed him the rope and the note, his usual calm demeanor fractured. His jaw tightened, and his eyes scanned the windows, the woods, the unforgiving darkness outside. "This is bad," he finally said, his voice low. "I know this knot, Coast Guard standard issue. And that line, it sounds like something from the old lighthouse logbooks." I felt a sudden, profound rush of relief. A man, a reliable man, was finally taking this seriously. "Can you stay?" I asked, the desperation clear in my voice. "Just for tonight? I don't feel safe." He nodded, and for the first time in days, I slept. The following morning, Brendan was gone before dawn, leaving a thermos of hot coffee and a note. "Check the perimeter, nothing. but I'm going to the lighthouse. There are old logs I need to see. That's when the strange pattern began.
On the nights Brendan was with us, nothing happened. The silent, watchful atmosphere dissipated, replaced by a sense of security. But on the nights he was away, either working or, as I assumed, searching for clues, I felt observed. Leela started having nightmares again, waking up sobbing about the man who lives in the light. I decided to install a hidden security camera pointing toward the trail leading up from the beach, and another focused on the dark tower of the lighthouse. 3 days later, I reviewed the footage. It was grainy, illuminated only by the half moon, but there it was, a figure, tall and dark, standing absolutely still at the edge of our clearing every night Brendan was absent. He didn't approach the house, he didn't tamper with the windows, he just stood there for exactly 1 hour, from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., and then silently retreated into the shadows. Who was this silent guardian, or stalker? My ex-husband, Arthur, was across the country and too arrogant to ever hide in the bushes. I kept re-examining the footage. I zoomed in, trying to catch a facial feature, a piece of clothing, anything. In the footage from the night before, the figure paused right at the edge of the clearing. A sudden gust of wind caught his old-fashioned wool coat, pulling it tight against his torso. And on his hand, glinting momentarily in the sliver of moonlight, was a ring. A distinctive, heavy signet ring with a crest I knew intimately. My breath hitched. It was Arthur's ring, the one he never took off, the one that was supposed to be a family heirloom, passed down through generations. Arthur wasn't in Boston. He was here, hiding in the shadows of Black Point, watching his own house, his own daughter. Why? The man who couldn't be bothered to call or visit was now a midnight prowler. I called him, my voice shaking with a mixture of terror and white-hot anger. Arthur, stop the pretense. I know you're here. Why are you stalking your daughter? His voice, when he finally spoke, was hollow, trained. So you finally saw me. I tried to tell you months ago. When you first decided to move up there, I told you Black Point was bad news, but you dismissed it as me trying to control you. Control me? You're hiding in the dark, Arthur. Explain. He sighed, a long, weary sound. I'm not here for you, Clara. I'm here because of the man you're dating. Brendan isn't who he says he is. His real name is Michael Thorne. I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. That's a lie. You're grasping at straws to ruin my life. Check the public records, Clara, not the local ones. His Coast Guard records are sealed. But look at the Maine State Archives for 1998. He was the lighthouse keeper's apprentice here. And he was suspected, though never charged, in the disappearance of a child named Jenna Reynolds, the same Jenna you used to visit at camp. She went missing from the beach right below the tower he was supposed to be maintaining. My stomach dropped. Jenna. The initial J on the driftwood. The silent man was my ex-husband, and the kind, protective man was a suspect in an old missing persons case. I met Arthur the next day at a discreet roadside diner. He looked even worse than the footage suggested. Gaunt, unshaven, running on pure desperation. After the divorce, I hired a PI to make sure you and Leela were safe. When you moved here, my PI immediately flagged Michael Thorne. He has a pattern. He targets single mothers in isolated communities. He changes his name, uses his Coast Guard background for credibility, and finds a child with a fascination for the sea. But he's so good to Leela, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. He wouldn't hurt her. He hurt Jenna, Arthur stated flatly, and I have reason to believe the lighthouse keeper who was charged with obstruction that year, an old man named Silas, was covering for Michael. Michael's still obsessed with that lighthouse. He goes there every night he's not with you. I watch him. He's not looking for clues. He's guarding the secret.
Explained that his late-night prowling wasn't about me. It was to ensure Brendan Michael didn't have unsupervised time in our cabin, especially with Leela. He knew I wouldn't believe him because of the resentment I harbored, so he chose the silent vigil. "And the notes?" I asked, remembering the terrifying line, "He sees you when he sleeps?" "That was me," Arthur confessed. "I tried to get the message across to you obliquely. I knew you had a soft spot for mysteries. I found those materials, the rope and paper, and made the note. I knew if I told you directly, you'd accuse me of harassment. I needed a hook." I felt a cold wave of shame and relief wash over me. The man I had scorned as a negligent father was actually risking his life and freedom to protect our daughter. I took Arthur's information to Deputy Miles, along with the recent security footage showing Michael Thorne's nightly visits to the lighthouse after leaving our home. Miles was skeptical, but Arthur's detailed PI reports and the cross-reference of the 1998 case finally broke through his apathy. A few days later, while Michael Thorne was out on a repair job, Miles executed a search warrant on the old lighthouse grounds. The search focused not on the tower, but on the isolated, abandoned keeper's cottage nearby. The call came in the evening. Miles's voice was grim. "Clara, we found something. Under the cottage's loose floorboards. A lockbox." In the box, there were multiple items. Jenna Reynolds' faded friendship bracelet, a collection of photographs of children, all with blonde hair and similar features to Leela, and a worn journal. The last entry in the journal, dated the day Michael met me, read, "The light shines again. A new subject. She is perfect. The father is gone. No one will interfere this time." He wasn't protecting Leela with shells. He was grooming her, finding his next victim in the solitude of Black Point, a location chosen because of his past history there. His absences were not for searching, they were for preparing. Michael Thorne was arrested miles away at a bus depot, trying to flee. The charges were attempted kidnapping, stalking, and obstruction of justice related to the old case. I went to the interrogation room, not to talk to him, but to simply look at him. He saw me and his composure vanished. "She was meant for the light, Clea. She was meant to be with me. You ruined it." His scream was raw, devoid of the polite facade I believed for months. I walked away, hearing the sickening echo of your antagonist's words. "I only loved the children." The nightmare was finally, irrevocably over. Arthur stayed. He didn't gloat or ask for forgiveness. He simply helped me change the locks, secure the property, and deal with the immediate aftermath. He was exhausted, but his eyes, no longer burning with professional ambition, held a quiet, protective clarity. Leela began seeing a child psychologist, specializing in trauma related to deceptive relationships. Her recovery is slow, but she is drawing again, no longer the dark, foreboding sea, but pictures of our cabin, bathed in the warmth of the setting sun. Arthur and I are not reconciling as a couple. The intimacy is gone, broken by his controlling past and my deep-seated mistrust. But we are a unit again, a parenting unit, defined not by marriage certificates or romance, but by the fact that he was willing to become a shadow guardian, a midnight suspect, to keep his daughter safe from a monster I had invited in. We sold the cabin at Black Point. We moved inland to a town where the streets are lit and the neighbors are visible. A few weeks ago, Leela looked up from her drawing and asked, "Mom, is Dad's job still watching over us?" I smiled, pulling her into a hug. "His job," I said, kissing the top of her head, "is being your dad. And that's the only job that matters." Real family, I realized, isn't always the one that smiles for the camera. Sometimes it's the one you thought was the enemy, the one lurking in the dark, the one who knows when to tell a difficult truth, even if it has to be delivered via a cryptic, terrifying note. It's the person who sacrifices his own peace to ensure yours. The salt spray and the constant wind are just a memory now. The silence has been replaced by the comforting, messy noise of a family learning to rebuild, trusting the visible light instead of the deceptive, hidden ones. And for the first time in years, I feel a true, unshakable peace.